Welcome to KBA's Vendor Viewpoint podcast, where we bring together Kentucky bankers and the industry's top vendor solutions to discuss important topics that affect your bank. This is Selena Parrish, KBA Director of Membership, Products and Services. Today we are featuring KBA-endorsed Abrigo. With us today is Justin Crawley. Justin is the Senior Consultant with Advisory Services at Abrigo. Justin has spent the last 7 years working with financial institutions of all sizes to transition to CECL. Justin specializes in helping banks find the quickest, simplest path to compliance using Abrigo's ALLL software and the advisory team's proven formula for successful transition. Thank you so much, Justin, for being on today's podcast. Please tell our audience about your role with Abrigo and how Abrigo is supporting banks who need assistance with CECL.
Yeah, thanks, Selena. It's a pleasure to be here. We've partnered up with the Kentucky Bankers Association over the last month or so. Probably seen some communication. My role here at the team is part of our advisory group. So we are fortunate in that we have had the opportunity to interact with hundreds of institutions over the last 6, 7, 8 years since CECL was announced, help get everybody stood up, and then also ride shotgun through those audit and regulatory exams, right? And so
That's
my
important.
role, yeah, absolutely. My role has been to kind of sit back and learn from everyone who's gone before, right? And now we're in a position to be able to offer some of those findings, some of those solutions that we've dialed in over these last few years to the listeners out there.
Wonderful. Well, I know a lot of our banks already have Abrigo in their solution toolkit. So on the CECL side.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with a handful of Kentucky banks already, big and small, right? But
Yes.
we certainly are excited to talk to everyone. I know we've already had a few that have set up some of these complimentary CECL deliveries with us so far, and they've gone really well. So it's been a fun transition over. If you'd like, Selena, I think probably can dive right in and share a little bit about the offering and how those have been going.
That would be wonderful, because I know that complimentary analysis that you're offering right now, probably a lot of our banks need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, we work with a lot of Kentucky banks already, but what we've found is that for, whatever reason, probably primarily that, it's just hard to reach everyone in a market, right? And so our partnership with the Kentucky Bankers Association has really allowed us to get in front of more of your members and help with some of these solutions that, again, we've developed over a long period of time, interacting with the banks that we do across really all the entire country, right? I mean, we've done this for banks big and small across. My brain works in census divisions, right? And so we've got some modeling that we've kind of pumped out, and part of that and the offering that we have for the Kentucky Bankers Association members that we wanted to share is, while you may already have a solution for CECL, I think that we're generally about 3 years in, right? So we're getting ready to fire up that third round of audit and regulatory exam for the non-public filers, right? Some of your public filer institutions have been live longer than that, maybe since January of 2020. And so while to date there hasn't been a lot of pushback, especially on things like the scale method or kind of homegrown warm models that some of the institutions are running, what we offer is a little bit more fleshed out solution, right? A little bit more automation, a little bit more operational efficiency. And so we wanted to be able to showcase that along with some of the findings that we found to be helpful from the audit and regulatory exams that we've been a part of over these last couple of years. And we sit on this huge consortia data set, right? Our team works with about 1,500 institutions that use the Abrigo platform. We have about 900 attempts at setting these up through my team, the advisory team at Abrigo, in setting those up and walking through the exam and regulatory side of things with those customers, right? And so I think about 60-70% of the institutions that have our platform overall have worked with the advisory team. And so until now, we've had all of these observations and all of this data that we haven't had a good way to share, right? But what we've done is worked with the product team here at Abrigo and developed a way for me to actually query. And I say me because I'm the one, if you decide you want to take advantage of this, I know we'll get into it a little later, but I'm the one you'll reach out to. I'm the one that'll meet with you and deliver this. But I have the ability now through some of the efforts of my product team to query the most recent call report data from an institution so that I have pool level balances, right? And rather than just offering a demonstration of what Abrigo can do and what the software is capable of, I'm actually able to prepare and come to a meeting with an institution showing their current loan balances, or at least, the most recent public filings of their current loan balances, and then apply some purpose-built modeling to that, really push those balances through our develop best practices approach and have an answer that is real, right? And the cool thing about kind of the way we've learned to operate is that as long as I have that guiding star, that call report published allowance figure, I can come to those meetings with something that is in the ballpark, right? And from an offering perspective, again, this is kind of a no strings attached. We'll send across some documentation and some some output so that you can kind of use those models however you'd like, or the output of those models however you'd like. Some institutions are using that as a bit of a sensibility check, right? I've been doing this thing for 2 or 3 years, and I have a number that I believe in, but would that be possible using the best practices of Abrigo advisory approach? And so that's kind of one way you can look at it. Another is as a true challenger model, right? This is something that maybe we've started getting some feedback. We've started getting some comments from our auditors, our regulators, and now we are looking to what's next, right? CECL's not new anymore. There's some established opinions. How can we best align ourselves with the market and with our peers? This is a way to do that, right? And probably more than anything, for the institutions who like what they see and decide that, hey, you know what, our current approach can be improved on. We're gonna think about making a switch, right? The cool thing about what we're calling CECL now, I just realized I hadn't said the name of this concept.
Oh, that's great. CECL now. Okay.
CECL now comes with the fact that because I've already done the work and I've already pushed our best practices and real life models through on your loan balances, we can avoid an immediate project. Meaning, if we're sitting here and we're recording this on August 11th, if I needed an August 31st allowance figure, I could use the work that has been done to deliver this CECL now with a little bit of supplemental documentation that my team can provide, and I can go live with that number, right? If I need to make an immediate switch, and this has come up a few times for us. There's some vendors out there maybe sunsetting CECL solutions, right? So sometimes you get warning and sometimes you don't get warning when those are going away, right? And so rather than saying, all right, well, we can get you running, but it's going to require this huge effort and this big project to do that, we can take pool level balances and shove that through this well-established, well-trodden path that we have in our best practices approach. And get a number that works, right? And generally, I mentioned kind of a guiding star of your call report and where your allowance currently sits. Generally speaking, I'm not, or let me rephrase that. I am able to come with a number that is reasonable in comparison to that, right? And so it's rare that an institution gives me a call and says, hey, Justin, I'd like to do something better for CECL. I think my current allowance is wrong, right? More oftenly, they're saying, hey, we've been doing this allowance for a long time. We like the number. We started getting some negative comments. We started getting some feedback, thinking about maybe it's time to make a switch. We want something that we can build up with some foundational documentation. We want something that is easier for us operationally. How can we do that without affecting the end number, right? And so there are a lot of elections that can be made. There are a lot of decisions that happen throughout that process that, as long as we know where we're headed, we can make and document in a real way, right? And make that documentation be really meaningful for the institution. And so this offering, you may have seen a message come through. It's a special offer across the top. I think it even has Selena's picture right at the top there, so you'll know it's the real deal, right? But that offering is the output of this calculation, and so we're more than happy to meet, have that discussion, really walk through the results, and maybe even use it as an education, right? If we're doing CECL now and we've been doing it the same way we started with no change, and maybe I wasn't confident then, right? Then this is an opportunity to have a conversation. Most of these calls we schedule for an hour.
Okay.
I've had a few run long, right? Where there's some real question and answer going on, some topics that maybe have been floating around that you just haven't tackled yet. Fortunately, we get to see that stuff all the time, and really can help answer some of that stuff. And I'm happy to do it, right? I think it's what Abrigo's kind of mission is to help financial institutions and their communities, right? And so, to the extent that this is that help you've been looking for, I think it's a great opportunity for everyone. And then, in the event that we want to move a little further with that, obviously we have a team here that's more than capable of taking on the burden of any type of transition.
So many of our members often talk to me about wanting benchmarking. And so I see this as an excellent opportunity for KBA members to get some benchmarking on their CECL process too. So, and you're doing this all at no cost for KBA members, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of that product work that I mentioned is what makes that possible, right? My team has made it to where it doesn't take me a full day to produce these calculations any longer, right? I've done kind of bespoke courtesy work as part of the sales cycle, for example, right? If we need a proof of concept, we need to show that this is working for an institution. I've done that for a long time. But what I haven't really been able to do is make that efficient, right? And so now, with some of the work that my product team has done, I can and some of the effort that's gone into kind of pre-building some of these baseline scenarios. You mentioned benchmarking, right? This is all built foundationally on our ability to analyze the 1,500 institutions that we work with, see what they're doing, and then apply that to gross balances for the institutions that we're making this offer to, right? And so I can do that in now maybe an hour instead of a day, right? And so it just makes sense to get it out there to people.
Well, and I think if anything, banks at this point, like you say, 3 years into it, are they interested in identifying improvement areas or simply validate, the bank's current approach is the right approach? So yeah, you're bringing to the table just, I guess, if anything, clarification with this complementary analysis.
Yeah, those use cases are exactly that, right? You kind of have two options. I'm generally able to land in the ballpark of today's number, right? And so you have an option of saying, hey, this is our challenger to what we're doing today, challenger to the status quo. Is this the fact that Abrigo and Abrigo's advisory team, who again has worked with hundreds and hundreds of institutions, the fact that they were able to replicate my outcome using their best practices approach means that I must be doing something right.
Oh, yeah. I think that would be comfort. Yeah, just knowing.
Yeah. And then the other is true as well, right? There's for a long time, it felt like we were partially in the business of educating the reviewers, right? Whether that was an auditor or that was a regulatory examiner for banks, we work with credit unions and alternative lenders as well. Whoever was on the other end of that engagement had not really, in any case, spent as much time around CECL as we have, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
do CECL all day, every day, as does my team. It doesn't make us a hit at a dinner party, but it makes us really good
Yeah.
through an audit cycle, right? And so,
Sure.
and so just through exposure and through repetition, we were able to kind of pick up on um, some of those pushback areas that we're
Yeah.
starting to see and address them, right? And so, with this particular offering, our CECL Now approach, the complementary set. Um, all it really takes is us getting engaged and flipping a switch to make that the real life version of a model, right? And so there's some safety there. Maybe I've been challenged. Maybe I'm being forced to make a change, right? How can
Right.
I
That's
most
true. Yeah.
effectively do that without just upsetting my entire life with a new project, right? I know
Of course.
I do CECL all day, every day. Your bankers, even the ones who do CECL for their bank, have other jobs, right? And so
Yes.
having
Lots of
someone
hats.
like, yeah, having someone like our team be able to come in and just shoulder the load there can be really helpful.
So, have you noticed any trends in feedback from auditors and regulators that you could share with our listeners just so they have a heads up on maybe some of the conversations
Yeah,
you're having with banks?
yeah, it's helpful to know what's coming down the pipe next time around, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Like I mentioned, we spent a few years on the education side. The Wild West days of CECL, as we like to call them, are I think officially over. There seem to be some formed opinions headed in, whereas previously those auditors, those regulators were very responsive, right? It was very, here's your model. What do I think about it in isolation? Now they're coming in like they did under incurred loss with a checklist of questions they want to see answered, right? And
Yeah.
so that's good and bad. And
Mhm.
the good part of it is that now we know what to expect. I will just kind of as a bit of a teaser say that some of the things we've started to notice extremely commonly in those are a real focus on the qualitative adjustments within a model, right?
Okay.
And that makes sense. A lot of the quantitative models, especially for institutions who don't have access to a set of benchmark data like we do, um, a lot of those institutions have a pretty low quantified portion of their reserve, right? And what that means is that maybe I'm sitting here 3 years in and 80 to 90% of my total allowance is in the qualitative adjustments, right?
Yeah.
I've been good at my job. We've underwritten well. We've managed those relationships well, and so therefore we haven't had losses. Right? That's great for a bank.
Mhm.
It's not great for building a CECL model. Right? And so
Sure.
because at the end of the day, what we're trying to measure is an inherent risk in a portfolio. And
Yeah.
so while that may be true that we haven't experienced loss, that doesn't mean that there's no risk that exists within our portfolio, right? And so how do we qualitatively now overlay some meaningful expectation of risk? And we've been successful in kind of helping drive that. I don't know how many of your members will have listened to some of the Abrigo webinars. I know, like you mentioned, we already work with a good number of KBA members, but some of the webinars we've had this year coming out of Abrigo, and feel free to kind of search around on abrigo.com. You'll find access to those webinars. Myself and others from my team have addressed some of these findings, but on the qualitative side specifically, we've really gone back to the drawing board in the last 12 months to help further what we've called our qualitative scorecard approach.
Yeah.
That approach has existed since 2020, since those initial filers went live, and we needed to help them qualitatively. And it's been sufficient, right? It's worked well, but in the face of these, I don't know if it's a renewed excitement about Q Factor or if it's just, hey, we're really confident on the quantitative side, and now we need something to criticize. So let's focus on that subjective
Okay.
element, right? And so with that kind of resurfacing, we've developed a bit of an enhancement to our qualitative scorecard, allowing institutions, if they want, to really lay out a framework that says, here's where I am quantitatively. Here's a maximum acceptable loss rate. And now this scorecard gives me the framework to allocate that bucket of Q factors in whatever portion I need to. right? And it does so kind of through the math, right? It's always a little bit more comfortable for us, and for the institutions we work with as well, to be able to point to the math when you start getting those
Definitely.
questions, right? Rather
Yeah.
than saying, well, I feel that we have this level of risk. Being able to point to a scorecard, and now our enhanced
Yes.
scorecard that says, because this happened, we applied this very specific additional adjustment, makes everybody a little bit more comfortable. And it makes, from the audit side, I know we focus kind of on the regulatory feedback, but from the audit side, it gives them something to tick and tie, right? It gives them something to check
Agree.
against.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of what I have always wondered with all the banks you're working with, would you say there's a certain asset size that's using different models for CECL? Because I feel like I talk to a lot of my member banks who are just doing the warm model.
Yep.
But then I've gone into some banks who have had either their auditor or regulator say that they needed to switch to the warm model because they were making it way too complicated. So, again, what do you see at Abrigo as far as the different models for CECL?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the WAR method is certainly very popular,
Okay.
particularly among those institutions who have not worked with the advisory team.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that it's inferior, but it often will lack maybe that narrative documentation piece that we're able to provide through a best practices approach, right? And
Okay.
so I think over the years and over the time that we have been working with these institutions, we did not develop best practices right out of the gate, right? These are best practices that have come to the forefront, and that includes methodology, right? And so we've seen a bit of a transition, even for I kind of draw this line in my mind and at total asset size of 1 billion, right? So we
All
have
right.
institutions who fall below that mark, institutions who
Yes.
fall above it, and historically those who fell above that line, they were already maybe doing something a little more complex, right? But those who fell below the line might have just said, hey, warm seems like the easiest thing, the most cost efficient way for me to get this problem
Okay.
solved. I'm going to do that, right? And so over the last year, 2 years, we've probably seen a little bit more migration of the herd towards that best practices cash flow based approach that my
Cash
team
flow.
uses.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I say cash flow specifically. I know, not to stay here all day. We could talk CECL for the
Of
next hour,
course.
especially if I get into
Uh-huh.
methodology. But I say cash flow specifically because we have some developed best practices for some of those smaller community institutions, including my CECL Now approach that will be
Okay.
walking people through that remove some of the complexity of that discounting and effective yield conversation around what would
Yeah.
traditionally be a discounted cash flow, right? And really focus on the loan level term cash flow, and allow those institutions to effectively communicate internally, right? Because it's not always about how can I convince my auditor or my regulator that this is a good approach. Sometimes it's just about, hey, how can I communicate to my stakeholders internally that we have
Of
a good
course.
that we have a good setup, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
removing some of those more complex elements and focusing on what really matters. And again, that's an estimate of credit losses over the life of the loan, right? Cash flow allows us to do that really effectively and really accurately compared to something like a pool level warm approach, right? And
Okay.
so carrying through some of the same concepts that your audience might already be familiar with, but doing it a little bit more specifically and a little bit more explicitly makes it that much better.
Definitely. Oh my goodness. Well, you just bring so much expertise to this whole dilemma of what method to use. And I think the complementary analysis is definitely, I would think, a first step for all of our KBA members. And so I definitely appreciate your time today to walk us through all the work that you're doing for our member banks. What is the best way for our banks to get in contact with you or your team at Abrigo to schedule a conversation about the analysis and CECL now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the best question that can be asked here at the end. I think obviously there's some email stuff out from the KBA that people can
Yes.
reference back to. We have some hyperlinked stuff to to get in contact with us directly. If you're looking to reach out to me, again, no reason not to really. I'm going to be the one you ultimately land with. So you can email me directly at justin.crawley@abrigo.com if you'd like to take advantage of the offer. And I believe we'll have some contact information in the show notes for this as well, if you're listening to us on YouTube.
Definitely. And additional information about Abrigo is available on KBA's website at kybanks.com. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for spending time with us today to do this podcast. And that's all for this episode of KBA Vendor Viewpoint. Until next time, this podcast is a wrap. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being with us.